sweet disposition, rose-colored vision. I can smell what you're cooking in your kitchen. It's not good. No, it's not even
All
food.
right. Joining me
I know
today on
you
this
wanna
beautiful
be.
Sunday, Miss Susanna Choffel. How are you doing, Susanna?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good, real good. We were just talking about the snow last week, and this week we get a beautiful Sunday, and yeah, I'm doing pretty darn good.
Good.
Trying to maintain through all this craziness we
I
got going on.
know. It's been a year. It's been a crazy year. I can't believe we're coming up on a year since, the lockdown or the whatever you want to call it, pandemic, the chaos, the craziness. So,
It is amazing. It is ridiculous. It is every
every emotion.
superlative you want to throw at it. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So that's kind of how I've been starting these is getting a feel for how you've been maintaining your sanity,
Mhm.
staying creative, So why don't you just share what you've been doing as a musician, as a mom, and also as a super cool radio host, since I'm sure there's been different levels of it for you, kind of,
Yeah.
obviously we started in this spring, and kind of give us a little bit of a chapter rundown of how you guys have been getting through as a family, and as an artist yourself, what you've been
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, so I think when this whole thing began back in March, well, one, I was extremely grateful. I had just gone on a trip to Santa Fe. So it was like we literally came back, and I think 2 days later, like everything shut down. So I kind of got my travel bug out of the way, which was great. It was my 40th birthday, and so I
Mm.
wanted to go. I used to live in Santa Fe. That's where I went to like music school and kind of cut my teeth as a young musician. And so I wanted to go back there to visit this magical place for my 40th. So that was kind of like I feel like I started the pandemic and the lockdown and the quarantine with sort of a really good spirit and attitude, although I was pretty bummed that South by all that's, I was part of the reason I took that trip is I had all these gigs waiting for me when I got back, and so
Mhm.
it's, whatever. It happened to everybody. I mean, that's the
Right.
one like kind of okay thing about this is that like we're all in it together. Like no, it's not like we're all suffering,
Yeah.
solo. Everybody has felt it in many ways, and we've been super fortunate. So, my husband Paul owns Cosmic Coffee and Beer Garden, and we were really nervous about that at first,
Yeah.
thinking, okay, we're gonna have to shut down. He was kind of later on the end of shut down because he does have so much outdoor space, so they were able to kind of utilize that. But then they finally had to close in, I think, April, part of May. Um, and it was interesting. I feel like there was this sort of beautiful time where, we were doing okay, at least for the time being. And we would go to Cosmic, like, and have the whole place to ourselves. He would have to go in and, like, do maintenance and check up on things. And so it was kind of like we had this incredible, outdoor space and coffee shop all to ourselves. And I did a few live streams from there. And so I think like the first few months of the pandemic, and I think a lot of people have talked about this that I've talked to, were like somewhat magical in a way because even though like everything, like even though there were totally some bummy things about it, everyone's income was affected, and if you were getting sick, obviously that was a huge thing. But if you were able to kind of like, maintain, it was sort of like the world stopped and allowed you to kind of have this interesting, like very intense, beautiful time with your family or yourself or your loved ones. So like there was that period that was like that phase, and
Yeah.
then I feel like by the end of the summer we were all losing our brains, especially if you had kids because you couldn't go anywhere indoors. And as we all know, summer's blazing here in Austin, Texas. So that was, I feel like
Yeah.
that was like the roughest spot, maybe was like, the August, September kind of thing where we thought we were going to be done by then. So it's just, I feel like there's been all these phases. So, but what I kind of try, well, one, I feel very fortunate because I'm a DJ at Sun Radio, and that's kind of been my sanity throughout this. I've been able to DJ
Yeah.
from
That's cool.
home. And yeah,
Oh,
it's like
wow.
made me feel, yeah, so we've been DJing from home just until
Wow.
recently. The studio, it was also kind of good timing in a weird way because our new studios were being built. So we couldn't even be in there anyway to broadcast. So they just opened in October, and we've been very, very slowly coming in and out to like maybe do a shift here, maybe do a shift there, but mostly we're still broadcasting from home, just to keep everybody safe. Um, so yeah, in a way, it's been kind of amazing because I feel like I've been able to stay connected to the music scene while I don't have gigs and while, kind of my normal thing isn't going on. I've at least been able to continue to be plugged in and trying to help musicians out by promoting whatever they have going on, and just kind of, staying in that momentum, that scene. And then creatively, it's funny. I feel like 2020 was one of the most prolific years I had as a songwriter.
Hmm.
I like 2018, 2019. Also, I just had a baby in 2019. Like I was just kind of in this crazy phase of motherhood and gigging and just, trying to, I don't know, trying to keep myself together, like, and I didn't really have much time or dedicate much time to writing new music. And last year is kind of funny. I started the whole year off in January on a songwriting retreat with a bunch of ladies. We went out to this cool little house in the hill country, and it was like Raina Rose and Carrie Elkin and Erin Ivy, Allie Holder, all these wonderful, wonderful like folk singer songwriters. And that I feel like sort of set the tone for the whole year. And I ended up writing because I didn't have gigs. I don't know if you found this to be true in your own world, but the lack of gigging has kind of led me to more time for writing. And now I am about to go back into the studio and start recording a new album. And I don't know if I would have had an album's worth by the end of this last year if I hadn't have really had that time, So there are some pros, some beauty that came out of a really ugly year, So
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah,
Hey, real quick, Susanna,
yeah.
could you just when you're the camera
Am I
framing is
cutting
kind of
off?
cutting you off at your
Yeah,
forehead, if you
I'll
could
sit
just
back
give
here.
yourself, yeah, that's cool. Or just,
It
yeah,
creeps me
either
out a lot.
way.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, it definitely gave myself, and I'm sure most of us, a chance to write music. I mean, if you didn't take advantage of this time to write music, I don't know when
yeah,
you're going to take advantage of
yeah,
time. And I've always been somebody who writes music for the most part in intense pockets of time. So like I think it has to do with the cycle of putting out new music. You need to put a lot of attention towards the writing, but then you need a lot of attention towards the recording and then the
sure.
production and then the touring and the gigging and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So for me, I always just kind of worked in that cycle and then wrote when that time came around, with some
yeah,
exceptions. So
yeah,
it's been great for sure. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of writing,
yeah.
and
That's very
got a
cool.
lot of stuff to work to put out
Yeah,
over the next year or two. So it's fantastic. And you mentioned, the summer. Yeah, the summer was tricky. The one outlet we had as a family, that was nice was we have a pool at our complex,
oh,
and
that's
it's a
awesome.
nice pool. So we just were able to go to that 3 times a week. That helped just cool us down a little bit.
Great.
For me, I hit a bit of a patch in like October where everything was fine. I was just really bored. I
Yeah,
was just
yeah,
so bored. I was like, man, I miss gigging. I miss,
yeah,
getting these little shocks of life.
yeah.
And it has been cozy with the family. It's been really nice. But
Sure.
I did
Yeah.
kind of come out of that phase. But I remember for a good 6 weeks, I was like, I don't think I've been this bored since like the middle of high school. I was like, there's nothing to
You're like, I
do.
need to pick up video games again.
I'm something. It was crazy. But
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
so and that's super cool that you do get plugged in with doing the DJing at home. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
wherever you were able to do it. I mean, that's fantastic. That's been what's nice about this podcast is not only do I stay plugged in to an extent, but really go deeper into the person to person touch than I've ever been able
right,
to go, because
right.
I'm able to have a nice conversation with cool people who share a lifestyle for the most part with me. So that's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, how have you? I'll just kind of touch on this briefly because I know we have children of the similar age. You have two, I have
Yeah.
one, but and then I want to get into more kind of your roots as a musician. But how you have? I know one daughter who I think is a little bit older than mine. My daughter just turned 5 in November,
Okay. Yeah.
um, and then you have a young one based on what you just said,
Yep.
who's around the 2-ish or maybe one and a
Yeah, she's
half
like
or
18,
something.
19 months. Yeah, yeah, she's
Yeah.
almost
So
there.
have you had your older one? Was she supposed to be in kindergarten or was she in between? Ours is like right in between. So
Right,
we haven't had to deal with daycare or kindergarten. Now she's been out of school for a long time and
right,
she's doing
right.
okay, but not a lot of socializing. Like, how
I
has that
know
been for
it's
you and
so
your
hard.
kids?
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
hard, especially at that age. We got lucky, and so okay, yeah, Lulu, my 5-year-old, was starting kindergarten this year, and we weren't exactly sure what we were going to do, but we ended up sending her to. She's in Montessori, so she's not in public. So we felt like her school started virtual as well, and we were like, ugh, I don't know about that because she did a little bit of virtual preschool back in March and April when this shut down, and it was just awful. Like it's so hard to get them to pay attention at that age and to focus in. She wanted to do it a few times but was like always put up a fit about it. So we opted out of virtual and we ended up kind of just doing a delayed start. She started in October and we felt okay about sending her back because it was like really, we're very fortunate. It's a private school. It's low student teacher ratio, and they're like able to utilize an incredible like outdoor campus that they have. So most of the day was spent outdoors. So we felt like, okay, we think we can do this. And so
Mhm.
she actually had a beautiful fall semester. It just came
Good.
to the close. Unfortunately, we've had to start virtual now because numbers are so high. So I don't know when she's going to be going back in person, but it's at least established some sense of like ritual and order. She checks in with her teachers every day and now knows the kids there and stuff. But it's hard, it's hard for everyone. It's funny. It's like I have some friends with kids who are older, who are like 8, 14, 12, that kind of
I think
range.
it's harder for those kids
Yeah,
than kids our age. No question about it, as far
yeah,
as I can
for
see and tell. I
sure.
mean,
Because our kids, like, they kind of just know their family as their sense of like community, and as
yeah,
long as they're with mom and dad or something, they're cool.
yeah.
But you're right, like the older ones, it's trickier. It's like they're used to being more social. They just want that interaction more, And anyway, it's just like there's a struggle with every single age, but I do feel really grateful in that the ages we're at, I haven't had to worry too much. Lou started kindergarten, but my other little one is just at home. She probably would have been at home anyway. I don't think we would have started daycare this early. So it's been all right. And Paul has a super flexible schedule, what with owning his own business. So even though he gets crazy busy, sometimes we're able to kind of juggle and work around our schedules, to where someone's always available. So yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
And is it Lou, your
Lulu,
older
yeah,
one? Lulu
yeah,
was, because I know some kid. I'm sure we both have a lot of peers and friends and
yeah.
family that have kids of the same age. And real quick, my daughter was 2 months past the cutoff. So that was already going to be a problem for us. We were planning on moving to Los Angeles, and
Oh
that
wow.
got completely waxed out. And first it was postponed, and then it's been completely, pretty much canceled because of
Right.
what California's like.
It's
So,
there, yeah.
but that was a problem because our daughter is not only tall and big for her age, but she's sharp. So to go back
Right.
and start with kids that are behind her in every facet, we have to figure that out in the next few
Right.
months. And
Right.
she hasn't had a lot of socializing. We think she's doing fine. We have to act like kids a lot of the time.
Totally.
That's part. We
Yeah.
have to do it. We have to
Yeah.
literally act like children with her sometimes. But
She'll
is
be
your
okay.
daughter?
Kids are resilient. She'll be okay.
I
It's
think you're
it's
right.
a strange time for everyone, but I think she'll be okay. Yeah.
And how has Lulu been with like the weirdness of like the strictness of the school protocol and like the
Right. The
mask? And
masks and
she probably
everything.
doesn't know anything
You
different,
know,
but she's
totally. It's kind of funny. We were worried about that. We were like, oh, there's no way they're gonna be able to keep their masks on all the time. And it's kind of funny. They've all been like all the kids just they think it's normal. They think it's fine. In fact, sometimes she'll remind me if we're going somewhere and like I forget to put her mask on. She's like, "Mommy, I don't have my mask on." It's like she's become so used to it. It's become her new normal. And so it actually hasn't been that big of a deal. It is a bummer because it's like you see like kids they want to get so close to each other and like they hug each other a lot. They're real like loving. So it's like I having to be like, oh, you guys keep space, like that whole thing. It just sucks having to constantly be like the space Nazi, with your kids, but it's just
right.
the times we're in. So
Yeah.
um
But
but
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned like 8, 9, 10-year olds. I know a couple friends of mine who have kids that age, and they are literally crying, begging to go back to school. And
Oh,
and I heard it pointed out on the radio, and I hadn't thought of it in these terms. I don't know why, but like for college kids, I mean, my heart goes out to anybody who's in like a senior in high
yeah.
school and has
Oh,
like their biggest year of whatever they do, whether it's sports or this, and they just can't do it.
it's
But
crazy.
college kids, I mean, I thought college kids would be fine. Like, oh, the college kids, they don't care, they just roll with it. They'll have. But could you imagine being that age, whether you're in college or you're just being
Yeah,
young and free and having nothing to do? I mean, that must
right.
just be horrible.
So it's funny you
Must be
say that
horrible.
because we're kind of a mixed family, and I have a stepson who is 19. He just started his
Mm,
first year of college this past year.
yeah.
And we were like worried about that too. We were like, oh gosh, now we're gonna have to worry about like the dorm scenario and him coming back home. And I have to say, like, he's been incredible, first of all. Like, he's
Mm,
like not interested in like the whole party scene. Like he said, for the most
okay.
part, the vibe at his school is pretty respectful. Everybody wears the masks, some of his classes are virtual, some of them are in person. But he's a real strict rule follower, and he's been able
Good.
he goes and sees his friends, but they hang out with masks outside responsibly. I know that's not every kid. I know, it's funny. I've kind of tried to put myself in their shoes. I'm like, how would I be like if this happened during my college years? I'm like, I might also just kind of be like, whatever, it's not
Totally.
affecting
Oh yeah.
me. And
Yeah. Totally.
when you're that age, you're kind of, the world is all about you. So I've actually been really impressed with how thoughtful he's been, to
Mm,
other people. So it gives me hope for the future.
that's
But
good.
but yeah, it did suck. Like his senior year of high school, he didn't get to do prom. He didn't get to do all the things, the normal things, didn't even have a ceremony, to walk across and get his degree. So just is what it is. Humans are resilient, so
Yeah. Hopefully coming to the end. So let's dig in a little bit. As I say every episode, this is always my favorite part because it's very interesting to me.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of tell us your roots as a musician, as a person
Yeah.
too. Where do you come from originally? But when did you start playing? You have a voice that strikes me as you were started singing very young. That would be my guess. But tell us like how you got involved with singing. You're a good guitar player. How did you start? When did you start playing guitar? And then after you tell us that, kind of who were the people, musicians that really inspired you growing up?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was born in Austin, Texas, which is kind of rare these days.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a very musical family, not in the sense of like nobody was a musician per se, but we had a piano, in the house, and my parents were always playing music. We were always singing at the top of our lungs, and it was just a very musically happy family, and they supported me in anything I wanted to do. And it was pretty apparent from a young age that I was very into music. My mom said I used to just follow her around the house making up songs and just singing, singing, singing. Was always in choir. I did band, all those things. Took piano lessons. That was my first instrument. But I picked up the guitar. I would say like kind of the spark of like really wanting to be like a singer songwriter per se, and the guitarist kind of hit me around 16, 17. Pardon me. I had like my first like big heartache at 17, and I was so heartbroken. And I was like, Mom, the only thing that will solve this is a guitar. I just want to throw myself into, songs. And she was like, all right, fine. So we went down to straight music, and, she financed an acoustic Fender for me. And I just locked myself in my room and taught myself everything I could. So I'm self-taught. I've taken some lessons over the years, but essentially I'm a self-taught guitar player. Um, so my technique probably sucks, but I also feel like it's also what helped me develop my own style,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I then, let's see, when I graduated from college, I ended up down at Texas State University. It was then called Southwest Texas in San Marcos, and I joined a couple bands. I wasn't really studying music yet. I was dabbling in maybe the possibility of studying it, but I was undeclared and just kind of having a good time in college and playing in bands. But that was great experience for me, like for like stage experience, because I was still kind of nervous as a performer. And then I ended up transferring to this. Once I realized, like, okay, I've got the music bug. I want to do this. I want to live it, breathe it. I actually want to study it. I ended up transferring to a college in Santa Fe called, it doesn't even exist anymore. It unfortunately like went under a few years ago, but it was this tiny little private school called College of Santa Fe, and I loved their music program because it was really diverse. It was like you could study world music, contemporary music, you know, classical music. You could also do audio production and recording, which is actually what I ended up doing. That's my degree, is in like music technology with an
Mm-hmm.
emphasis in performance and composition. And so I ended up doing that, graduated, came back to Austin, and that's when I really started kind of, I guess, just hitting the ground, you know, put together a band, recorded my first album, started playing at Momo's. I thought I'd wear my Momo shirt today, which is, did you ever play at Momo's?
I got one gig in a month before they closed
Awesome.
down, and I had a
Okay.
great
I'm like,
time
because you're
there. And it
super
was
young. I don't know. I didn't know like what, like if you had actually played there or not. So yeah, but Momo's was the jam. That was like kind of where, you know, I ended up getting my first residency. Momo's and Hole in the Wall and, you know, Ruta Maya. There were a few other places, Saxon Pub. But yeah, Momo's is also where I ended up meeting Paul. That was his venue. So we became friends and then ended up, you know, getting together and having a couple babies. But yeah,
so your Paul was the Paul who was booking there, because I
yeah,
remember the that's great,
yeah,
small world.
yeah. It was
I
his venue.
remember a
He owned
Paul
it.
booked me
Yeah,
there. That's funny.
Paul
That's
Lavesi.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
So Momo's
That's
was just
cool.
like our world, you know. And
Mm,
so then Paul and I ended up moving to New York in like 2012, and it was really weird. Like he got a really great opportunity to come up there and run. Have you ever played Hill Country Barbecue in New York or
no, I've heard of
DC?
it though. I've heard
Okay,
of it though.
yeah,
Yeah,
you would
I
do
know people
great
that
there,
have played
like
it.
for whenever the world opens back up again.
Hmm.
But it's a really cool kind of Americana roots sort of place in the middle of New York
Right.
City, you know, with an emphasis
Hmm.
on barbecue. And they hired Paul to come up and be sort of the entertainment booker, you know, to run
Hmm.
the venue part of it, because they wanted someone with a bunch of ties to Texas music, and he kind of knew
Hmm.
everyone. So, pardon me. So we moved up to Brooklyn, dug into New York, and spent 3 years there. He opened up a
Wow.
venue while we were there. Momo's closed, unfortunately, because of really weird thing, but basically, long story short, Katz's, which was like the Jewish deli below, like the New York Jewish deli below Momo's, was had gone under, and they were doing reconstruction there, and they struck like a main support beam, and it like made Momo's like completely unsafe. So he had to like close in like 24 hours. It was crazy. So that
That's
was
how
kind of,
Momo's closed.
that's how Momo's closed. It was
Oh
kind
my
of a sleazy
gosh.
deal too. We can kind of talk about it now. For a while, we were like we couldn't talk about it, but the landlords there had been trying to buy Paul out for years, and he was like, no, no, no. They were trying to build like condos, you know, all
Mhm.
over there, and um, so he thinks, we kind of think to this day, that it was sort of a sleaze move, that they kind of like made it to where Momo's was
Mm.
uninhabitable, you know, so
Oh
that they could get
jeez.
in there and turn it into a cheesy nightclub. So, whatever. It was really hard at the time, but all's well that ends well. It kind of forced
Yeah.
him to sort of go back to the drawing board and figure out what he wanted to do. We were in New York at the time, so he was actually
Hmm.
busy opening up a new venue there, and it was fine. But when we came back to Austin, so we decided 3 winters into New York, I was like, I can't do another winter here. I loved it. It was incredibly enriching, and I'm so glad we like did that time in New York. I always wanted to live in a big city where like you had to get around by train, and you know, I just
Hmm.
wanted that experience and to be up
Yeah.
against art constantly and just everything. So I'm so glad we did it. It was really intense and really tough, but it led to some wonderful things. But we moved back, and and then I got pregnant. Like, right, it was almost like the universe was like, come back to Texas to have a family. So we moved back, and that's when he was like, he kind of quit New York because he was still tied to New York, but he got out of all of his businesses in New York and was like, let's set up back again in Austin and let me figure out what I'm going to do. And then Cosmic started coming into fruition for him, and so yeah, the next couple years we're having a baby, opening up Cosmic, and yeah, it's just been a wild past like decade basically with him. But
Hmm.
that's kind of
Yeah.
the gist of
Cosmic.
it.
Cosmic is a great spot. He did a good
Thank
job,
you.
and yeah, that's a great spot.
He's done a great job.
Um,
It's beautiful. So yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention The Voice. I was on The Voice right when I
yeah,
moved to
yeah.
New York. I got a call to have like an audition for The Voice. And so it was really funny timing. It was kind of perfect timing, honestly, because I was so broke from moving to New York. And I was like, what am I going to do for money? Well, The Voice came calling. I ended up spending like half of the next year in LA filming The Voice. And
Mhm.
so that was like a great like gig to get. And then I moved back to New York. So, and then it was great because I moved back to New York kind of from LA from The Voice. And I was like, I had this instant calling card because I had been on The Voice.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
the universe sort of worked in this beautiful way for a few years, and just everything sort of fell into place. But yeah, now I'm back in Austin. I'm DJing, which has been a great day gig, especially for being a mom, where I sort of like pulled back a little bit from the music career. And now I feel like, so my second is like 19 months old, and I feel like I'm kind of getting into that mode of like, okay, I'm ready to start maybe inching back out again into music career. So like I said, I'm trying to get back into the studio, starting to do some pre-production on songs, and I know it's so hard to plan anything right now, at least as far as touring and what anything even means. But it doesn't mean you can't keep releasing your music.
Yeah.
So that's just the goal right now, is to get some new stuff out there. So
Cool.
yeah,
To go back to a couple of things you said, well, I'm glad you got involved with the radio. You're very good at it.
thank
It's a great
you.
station. Sun Radio is definitely top of the heap in town, but also,
Thank you.
I've toured a lot over the country, and every major city has a cool radio station. Sometimes two. I guess you'd say we have a few, but
Yeah, we're lucky
Sun
here in
Radio is a
Austin.
cool station, and you have a
Thank you.
real knack for it. So I'm glad you fell
Thank
into that,
you.
and it must be a good job for a mom too.
It's
Um,
great.
but I want to talk about The Voice a little bit. I also want to talk about your
Yeah.
experience in New York a little bit, because I feel like maybe you got in there just before it became kind of uninhabitable by the artistic
Yeah.
community. But I'm interested to know who your influences are musically. Who were
Oh
you? I'm
yeah.
sure there's been many over the years, but who
Yeah.
were the ones that really kind of
Yeah.
gave you the light, you know?
Right. So, um, I would say growing up, like I was very lucky. My parents had a pretty awesome record collection. I mean, they were really into like folk and pop. I mean, Fleetwood Mac, Joni Mitchell, a lot of Motown. So those were kind of the sounds of my childhood. Lots of singer-songwriters. I think the only thing they weren't super into, would be like rock, and I kind of had to like discover like hard rock like later. They weren't like Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix fans, but uh but I would say like some of the voices in my teens, when I was like starting to play guitar and like really, you're at that point where you're just starting to just live and breathe music.
Hmm.
I would say some of the voices and songwriters I loved were like Fiona Apple,
Hmm.
Erica Badu, Lauryn Hill I was a huge Lauryn Hill Fugees fan. I was really into hip hop. So I loved like Most Def and Tribe Called Quest and a lot of hip hop. I got really into the blues for a bit and just dug into went to every blues concert here in Austin, whether it was Buddy Guy or, God, who did I used to, Austin's just kind of like,
They all
so
come
many
through.
so many great blues people come through. I know,
Yeah.
I can't even
Yeah.
remember. Oh, I used to go see Bonnie Raitt every chance she would come through, and a lot of times she had Keb Mo open for her, and that was always
Mhm.
a treat. But yeah, and then in college, I would say I started digging into world music, and I got really into Brazilian music and reggae, and that led me.
Mhm.
I ended
Yeah.
up traveling to Brazil like after my senior year of college, and just loving the music and the language. I studied Portuguese for a little bit, and I've uh yeah, I went kind of down the world music path, got really into Latin music, which I think then started kind of informing and influencing my feel a little bit, as a guitar player and as a musician. It definitely influenced it, and so I'm kind of all over the map, honestly. And that's why I love being a DJ, and I think it
Mhm.
works well for me, is because I just love all the music, and I love talking about it and diving into it, and sharing it with others, exposing people to it. So it's obviously like Sun Radio, we kind of have our niche. It's not like I'm going to be playing like a ton of like obscure world music or something, but still it's a nice platform to be able to like, share music and find music too. Sometimes like we'll have a music meeting and I'll discover some amazing new artist that I've never even heard of, that one of the other DJs has brought in and been like, gotta hear this,
Hmm.
So I just love music. It's funny, for a brief time in college, I thought about studying ethnomusicology,
Hmm.
because I just loved like finding the roots of different musics, and like I just wanted to travel the world and discover, the roots of all the source of all music. So
Hmm.
but yeah, that's kind of it in a gist. I would say,
Hmm.
between the jazz, the blues, the folk, the soul, and the world, Bob Marley was a huge influence on me. His guitar playing, that just, rhythmic reggae guitar playing really influenced
Hmm.
my guitar
Oh,
playing.
wow.
I wanted to echo that, that up strum that they have of, highlighting the two and the four, and like just kind
Hmm.
of like, I don't know, always figuring out a way to make my guitar playing percussive instead of just strumming. I think after I'd learned, basically all your basic pop, blues, folk strum patterns, I was like, okay,
Hmm.
what more is there? There's got to be something more than
Yeah.
this. So yeah.
Yeah. I got into reggae huge in college,
Yeah.
huge. Like for high school, I picked up a guitar at 15, and the before the music was starting to come really important, I got into really into blues and rock and roll, and then when I got to college, reggae became a huge thing, and Marley, Tosh, and Toots were
Yes.
have become probably the most sustaining,
Hmm.
um, powerful, joyous thing musically
Yeah.
that I've enjoyed since then. And it's funny, over the years I've engaged in a handful of reggae playing, but
Hmm.
not that much.
Yeah.
But the influence of it is in there somehow, because
Yeah.
it's probably more vocally than, well, it's probably
Yeah.
rhythmically too. But
I could hear that.
you look at Marley and Tosh and Toots, and the singing, the power of those guys' voices, and the prophet. You don't in music where you're talking about blues or rock and roll or world music. There's not that many styles where the person delivering the lyric sounds like a prophet.
Totally.
And those reggae guys, it is a prophet
Yep.
perspective, and it's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
In the truest word of what awesome means, the
Yes.
biblical sense of awesome.
Yes.
So it's had a
Agreed.
huge
Agreed.
influence on. I love
It's
it.
like
I
they're
still love
touched
it.
by God. It's like they have
It
this connection that's just
exactly.
instantaneous. And I agree. It's pretty powerful. So yeah.
Totally. And I
Yeah,
think
man.
that's so
I
cool
think,
that it influenced your guitar playing, because I
yeah.
don't know if it's influenced mine, but the influence, it's in there. I know
So
it's
I
in
was
there
gonna
deep.
say, it doesn't always have to be overt. A lot of times our
Right.
influences kind of are sneaky, and just the way you think about maybe approaching your rhythm has been changed or altered in ways that you can't really even like,
Yeah.
voice. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, have you played Bob Marley for your kiddo? Because we have found that like,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you have, but like often in the car when like my little one is having a screaming fit, it is literally the only thing that will calm her down. I'll just put Bob Marley on and it's just like, boop. I mean, she just quits crying. It's so funny. It's like he has this instantaneous calming effect on babies and kids. I've had other friends tell me the same. So anyway,
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, I have a very quick, funny story about Bob
yeah,
Marley and my daughter. There was a period, my wife was home with my daughter for the first 14 months. And then there was a period where I was working like pretty part time, but home most of the time with my
yeah,
daughter for another year after that. And so, we'd run errands together. And I remember I was definitely playing Bob Marley for her. I don't know what or when, but we were in a bank on a Monday morning, and I put her down on the table while I'm filling out the forms. And she just starts going, Bob Marley, Bob Marley. She started saying Bob Marley in the middle of the bank. It was
that's
so
awesome.
funny. And the
That's
bank was so quiet. It was like everybody was hearing her go,
they were
Bob
like,
Marley.
that's great. Oh my God, I love it.
So yeah. Yeah, I listened to a lot of Peter Tosh and a lot of Toots. So too, she's heard a lot of that too. But
Yeah,
so you were in New York, and I love New York. I love to visit. Never I consider living there in very brief
yeah,
things, but it's
right.
just too much to swallow, I think,
It's a
if you're
lot.
going in without some foundational connections there. And
Absolutely.
I had some, but not in a sustaining form. so you were kind of in there, I feel like right before it changed to, like I mentioned, at a point before Corona, years probably mid-teens, 2000 teens, it's like artists can't live here anymore.
Nope.
It's too expensive. There's just a
So
bunch of bankers, world bankers that live here now. So were
it
you
was
able to get a little bit
unsustainable.
of that good classic New York
Yes.
bohemian vibe?
I feel like we were right on that precipice. It was like you could tell when we were moving into our Brooklyn neighborhood, Crown Heights, it was like just starting to get like gentrified, it was like just starting to get like kind of newer elements. Not that I had much, we had just moved in, so we were probably part of the problem. But we were just artists, moving in. It's not like we were some like rich bankers coming into the hood or anything like that.
Right, right.
But you could definitely sense that it was changing. And for sure, I mean, gosh, we couldn't even, the whole way we lived in New York, it was kind of hilarious. We just sublet for 3 years. I think our first apartment, we actually like put down a deposit and did it the proper way. And then after our first year there, where we wanted to move in, we were living in Brooklyn and we wanted to move into Manhattan because we were just constantly there and we were spending so much time on the train. So we found like a cheap, tiny sublet, on the Upper West Side. And that began this like 2 year, like we would literally stay like 3 months here. And then we put basically
Wow.
all of our stuff in storage and we would just like, we lived in so many neighborhoods. Our friends used to tease us. Like our friends who lived in New York were like, you know New York better than I do because you've lived in like 6 neighborhoods the whole time you've been here. And they've been like all over. I mean,
Hmm.
we lived in Inwood, which is like almost to the Bronx. We lived in Chelsea, which was the coolest. That's like just the heart of like New York, I feel like in so many
Hmm.
ways. We lived in Brooklyn and several neighborhoods in Brooklyn. It was just funny. We lived everywhere.
That's
But it was
cool.
amazing. It made for a really fun, diverse experience of New York. I
Yeah.
still feel like you could drop me in New York now and I would know how to get anywhere, just because we spent so much time all over that island. So, but, and I think you're right. You mentioned a good point. Like, it's really daunting to move there if you have no ends or connections. Like, I had always entertained the notion of moving there, but was so scared to. I mean, I had friends
Hmm.
who lived there, but it was like once Paul showed that he kind of wanted to go there and he started looking around and just found this like perfect job for him that was like, it was like I was like, okay, cool, I can do this with you if we have like a
Right.
partnership going in and like we
Yeah.
have some connections. And then the voice, like I said, that just became like, kind of kismet. But it can be really daunting. And David Byrne wrote that great book about, I can't remember what it's called, but he writes about New York and how it's just become completely um, unlivable, for artists, and how like they really have to think about like, do they want it just to become basically an island of like finance workers and uh, I don't even know what the number one job in New York is, but it's like it's just very unsustainable. And since the pandemic hit, I have so many artist friends who've left. They've just fled because it's not sustainable. So
It's not New York anymore. It's the same thing with Los Angeles. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and the irony is maybe COVID is the reset button, the
right,
reset button that New York needed. You never know what's
right.
going to happen.
It's true. It might be. It might
It's
be.
impossible to predict it. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like I mentioned, we were planning on moving to Los Angeles, and we spent a year and a half planning, saving, all kinds of stuff. Then as soon as COVID hit, we postponed it 6 months, and then we canceled it over the holiday, basically over Thanksgiving or in the fall or
Yeah.
something, because it's not what we were moving out there for. It's not that
No.
anymore. It's something different. I
Yeah.
don't know where it's headed, but
I
California's not headed
know.
in a good
I
direction, really.
I
I
love
love
LA.
California.
It's
Yeah.
it's a bummer because I haven't been in a few years, and we were actually going to go out there this year too to like visit some friends and kind of reconnect
Hmm.
with LA. Because when we moved to New York, we were actually considering, we were debating LA or New York, and all signs kind of were pointing to New York, so we did that. But I've always felt a strong love and connection to LA too, and it's so sad. I mean, gosh, between the wildfires and COVID, it's just been an crazy year for them. I don't know what California is going to look like after
Yeah,
this.
a
So,
lot of things, bad timing, the homelessness. I mean, that's everywhere, but it's really intense out there. Really
yeah,
bad.
I'm sorry you didn't get
Um,
to live that
it's
dream. That's
okay. You know what?
brutal.
It's funny. You know what? It's funny because we were all in on it. We were ready to do it. But now we're great. You know,
Yeah.
we feel great about, we've pivoted and we're not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah.
And we're so glad we didn't move out there because it's so bad out there, you know?
Yeah.
So we're good, man. It's not, you never
Awesome.
know, a couple
Yeah.
years down the line, who knows, we can do it again. But,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the voice because that's a unique thing. And I did talk to Nakia, who had a similar
Oh, yeah.
experience. Was he on the season right before you? Were
He
you on
was
the
2
second one?
seasons before me. I was on
2 seasons
season
before.
3. He was on the very first season. So yeah. Yeah.
So that's a unique and kind of intense thing, and obviously people are going to have opinions on that show in general. But just speak from your experience, like the pros and cons. How was
Yeah.
that whole thing?
It was definitely, an adventure. It was an experience, and I kind of went into the whole thing just curious, honestly, about like what life looked like in that department of entertainment and performing. I had come from such kind of like a roots, Austin, where it's like
Hmm.
it's not about like who you are. It's just kind of about like how talented you are, like the songs, digging in at the Saxon pub or whatever every night. And so I just kind of wanted to experience that. So I feel like I went in very open-minded. I didn't go in going, I'm gonna win this thing, or I'm gonna,
Right,
I
right,
kind
right.
of
I
knew
need
that.
this. I need
Yeah,
this.
totally.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
Totally. And there were a lot of singers on the show that were like that. I mean, they
Hmm.
were competitive. A lot of them were super young, and this was kind of their first experience, in the limelight. And so they
Hmm.
kind of were like, this is it. This is my big break. Whereas I kind
Right,
of looked
right.
at it, I was like 32 when I was on there. It was so funny too, the age thing. They make you feel like you're a dinosaur if you're like above 30 on that show. I mean, really, it's hilarious. Because looking back now, I was like, oh my God, it was like so young on that show. But I was so glad I had that life experience and performing experience because it wasn't the end all be all for me. It was just another experience and another feather in my hat or whatever.
Right.
But it was, I had a great time. I met some really cool people. I thought that Blake, my coach, was actually really sweet, humble dude, like very easy to work with. Wasn't like a diva or anything like that.
Hmm.
And Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible launching point for part of my career, especially like social media, basically. I feel like up
Hmm.
until The Voice, I had like been okay at social media. And I almost feel like The Voice is like training camp for like how to be a social media like
Hmm.
person. And it ups your following and it just kind of it's so geared towards that. So that was like a great thing it did. But really it also it gives you a great little thing to put in your bio when you're like after The Voice. It set me up for like some great tours, and even in Europe, like you're basically
Hmm.
known worldwide after you've been on The Voice. If you've at least if you I only got through I did 3 performances. I actually my knockout round was Bob Marley. And I still get teased to this day because it was obviously like a poor vocal song choice because I wasn't trying to like wow anybody with, crazy runs or anything, but I was
Right.
trying to show off vibe and character and
Hmm.
just soul. But I was going up against these singers who were trying to sing like, the biggest, baddest,
Right.
greatest songs ever. And looking back, I totally get it. Um, but it was great. I feel like I just got everything I wanted out of it. It's like it was perfect. I didn't have to go
That's cool.
too deep into it where
Yeah.
I mean Nakia actually went pretty he went pretty far. He made it into the top like 8. Also the season I was on was a really weird season where they experimented with doing more having more team members, and so it like took forever to get to the live.
Mm.
So like
Mm.
I only got like 3 in because it took like an extra round or whatever to get to the live. So it would have been kind of fun to make it to the live round because that's where the audience gets pulled in to vote for you. I didn't make it to that
Hmm.
point, but it was fun, man. I got like had some funny interactions with CeeLo. It was the original 4, it was like CeeLo and Christina
Hmm.
and Blake and oh God, who am I missing? Oh, Adam Levine. So it was it was fun. I mean I honestly look back on it with just like a real like I can't believe I did that. That was fun sort of thing. No regrets and or anything like that. So
Well, that's perfect. That sounds
yeah.
like the perfect. You went in with the perfect perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sounds great. That's
Yeah, it's
I'm
so
sure it
funny.
was
It's
not the
like
same for a lot of other people, but it's good that it
it
was like that
isn't.
for you.
It isn't. And I really did feel for those young kids who had such like their egos just had not been primed for it, and I would often comfort them. Just be like, I feel like I became like a mother in some ways, or a big sister to some of those
Mm,
really, really young kids, and just be like, look, this is not your last rodeo. Like, you are an incredibly talented person. This is just a really cool way to start your career, So,
yeah.
but anyway, yeah,
That's cool. So to kind of round this all out,
yeah,
you mentioned, kind of what you've been doing with your family, and you've got a lot. You've been sustaining yourself with the scene through the DJ gig, and you've got an exciting, things coming up because you've got material to put out and produce. So
yeah,
that's fantastic. But you're in a pretty unique situation, perspective and knowledge wise, in that you are a musician, you grew up here, you are a DJ, so you have, tentacles into the community. You also are married to somebody who is on the live music side of
hmm
the industry in the city. So I guess my kind of to suck all that into one
yeah.
thing is, what are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are you seeing in terms of 2021, I guess, and 2022, the
Yeah,
next 12, 18 months? What
yeah,
do you know any more than the rest of us? Or have you heard things? Are you say, what do you expect the scene to be like and the industry to be like moving
yeah.
forward here?
Um, well, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. I do know some things just from talking to Paul about, what's going on the business side of things, as far as, the restaurant, bar, live music scene. It's interesting. I think, the I think the saddest, like, most unfortunate thing is the venues that have been having to close because of this, and I think we've all been asking ourselves as artists, like, are there going to be any venues left, like, once this thing runs its course, to like perform it? And I do think that are there's some interesting things I've been hearing from different people about bigger venues kind of coming through to buy up smaller venues, and then sort of like run them under their umbrella so that they can still
Oh yeah.
exist and still run, but it'll just be slightly
Hmm.
different. Now, I
Hmm.
hope they don't all become Hard Rock cafes, and I
Yeah.
don't think that's exactly the format, but I have heard a little bit of that, just to like save some of these spaces, but I don't, as far as like the environment and what it's going to be like. I mean, I keep talking about it with Paul. It's like we kind of keep trying to figure out, like, okay, maybe by summer, when hopefully lots of folks are vaccinated, but we'll see. It's rolling out very slowly.
Yeah, it
I have
is.
no idea what that's going to look like. It's like, maybe with the changing of the guard here in the next week, we'll see some change. I have no idea. I think that
Yeah.
might have a lot to do with like the setting the tone of this year, is just changing of the administration and how things have been run. Because I mean, I think that pretty much everyone can agree that it's been run horribly, as far as, how our country in general. I'm not going to get political or anything like that, but it's just like, I think if we had more support from the government in general, we wouldn't have to keep doing these, like, I feel like it's like we're constantly having to do these test runs and test trials of normalcy again, because we have to. Everybody has to make a living. But if
Yeah.
you look at other countries who've had more government support, they've been able to just like shut down for a while, get the virus like under control, and then reopen, because people are getting supported, with more money or whatever from the government, and businesses are being supported. But you just don't see that here as much. It's kind of been a everyone for themselves sort of thing, and it's sad and unfortunate, because it's basically led everybody to make decisions that they have to. It's like kind of life and death. Like, am I going to feed my family, or am I going to, and I get it. It's almost like you can't really judge too harshly anyone, because it's we're all in a really, really tough spot.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that there is a hope of getting to some type of normal live music situation by the end of the year, as long as it's, I do think masks are maybe going to have to like kind of stick around for a while. I mean, I think that, like, it would just be hard to imagine our world just completely becoming mask free by the end of the year and it being okay. I do
Yeah.
think that there's going to have to be at least if you want to keep safe, if you want to keep yourself safe or whatever, you know, like I think you're going to have to make that decision to just stay masked for a while. And maybe, you know, weather dependent, but I really think outdoor shows are kind of the way to go right now for most venues. And I know, unfortunately, all venues don't have that resource, but I think that's a huge component. You know, when Paul has talked about reopening for live music, it's basically only been like outdoor ideas, you know, ideas for outdoor play. And I don't know, man. That is all I got. I really don't. I wish I knew
Yeah.
more.
Well, that's a
I'm
little bit
definitely
more than
diving
I,
into all the
yeah,
conversations. But what's that?
that's a little bit more than I knew and heard. So that contributes
Yeah,
some new knowledge. But yeah, there's no way to predict it. But at the same time, what I keep telling myself is there's always going to be people who want to play music. There's
yeah,
always going to be people who want to hear it. And
absolutely.
the last 120 years, there's been people who are the middlemen and women who facilitate.
Yep.
You know, the venue people, the festival people. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, no, I think
Um,
and yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if you've seen some of those I think it was like Andy Langer posted something about the new festival and how like you can buy yourself like a kind of a pod area that's sort of roped off or whatever, and it's like it's definitely
mhm.
not going to be the same feel as everybody like, you know, just squeezed into the crowd, but it's like I think there are ways to pull off having big live music events and creating space. It just has to be done very, very cleverly, very smartly, and people have to be on board, you know. So, but that's the most difficult thing, right? Is everybody's on the same page, you know, with what they
Yeah.
believe, what they want to support, what they, you know. So, but you know, we're seeing live music happen right now. I think people are trying to be wise about it, but it's so hard, you know, because we're the thing that just sucks right now is like, you know, our numbers are just so high. So it's like if it wasn't so high, I feel like, you know, we could do some things a little more safely, but it's really intense right now because if we're promoting any type of gathering during this time, it's kind of like, ugh, you know, it's just if we can hold off just a little bit longer, I feel like that's probably the smartest way to go. And
Yeah.
then we can do it in a much safer, you know, more jovial way, you know. So, but
For sure. Well, I'd
yeah,
probably go to a few more music festivals myself as someone who's getting a little older. If I had a nice little roped off area,
that's
rather
good.
than,
I was joking. I was like, man, I'd be much more likely to go to festivals if I didn't
yeah,
have to like worry about drunk people running into me left and right. So,
yeah. I've pretty much, with very few exceptions, I've pretty much stayed away from music festivals since my mid 20s. And I
yeah,
used to go a lot when I was younger, but
sure.
you get to a point where it's like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, no,
I've done
totally.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
if I wasn't with Sun Radio, I probably wouldn't have been going to ACL Fest the last 2 years because it's like I get the kind of like I get to take a reprieve and go backstage and chill out for a bit. And
yeah,
not that I don't get like a VIP pass or anything, but it's like just getting like somewhere where I can get away from the crowd for a bit is like that's basically what I need because
right.
it's too much otherwise. So
Totally.
unless you're on stage playing, so yeah,
Then it's different. Yeah. Then it's
yeah,
good.
totally,
Bring it on. Bring it on.
yeah.
Well, Susanna, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and
Thanks for having
perspective,
me.
and I'm glad to hear things are going good. And let's see here, 2021,
I know.
bring us some new vibes
I'm
here.
an optimist, so I approach
Yeah.
everything with an optimistic attitude, and I think I know it's going to be tough. It's not going to be an easy year just because 2020 was hard, but I do think we're going to see some good things towards the end of the year. You know, it's just going to take a little bit longer. So, but what do you have going on musically? What's your new thing you got going on?
So I've just been focusing on, I've been releasing singles since last fall. I've been releasing a single every like 2 or 3 months, and
Awesome.
so I've put about 6 out in the last year, which is,
Okay.
before that I was albums, and then I was like, I'm
Yeah.
switching to singles,
Yeah. Totally.
for a lot of reasons. But so now, because of the same things you were saying, having time to get a lot of stuff in the ready bin. I'm trying to up that to a single every like 6 weeks or something coming
Yeah.
this year, moving
Awesome.
forward. Just pump out a lot of stuff and compile that into an LP and EP here and there. But stayed away from live shows pretty much completely. I've done
Yeah.
one private show, which was
Yeah.
scheduled before the pandemic,
Right.
and then redid it in the fall. which was fun. But I'm just holding off on live stuff
Yeah.
until I'm vaccinated,
Yep.
because
That's good. Yeah.
it's just the way I'm doing it.
I know.
My
I've done a
wife's
couple
a
things
big fan.
too, and it's like each time, like they felt okay, but then it was like afterwards, I'd kind of freak out, and I'd be like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I hate this feeling that I have to have of
yeah,
like, did I just do the wrong thing?" So
totally.
anyway, yeah,
Yeah, no, so I'm just pumped to put out new music and
awesome.
try to get some recording and itching for live stuff. But
Yeah,
the time is going fast. I gotta say,
it
like,
is.
time. Not only is it going fast, at times it goes slow. But haven't you found that time has become something so weird in general?
Yes.
It's like it's become more weird in the last year than any time I can
Yeah.
remember. Where it's like
Agreed.
it seems like it was yesterday. It seems like it was far away. It's very unusual, very
Totally.
strange.
Yeah. When
Yeah,
I was just looking back like at the end of the year, I always go back through my photos and sometimes I'll make like a photo calendar or a photo book or something. And it was just crazy to see all the different like I was like, "Oh, that was this year," like we managed to make it down to the beach for a quick trip. Like, and that was this
right.
year. I managed to do this thing and it was just it's always bizarre looking back at a year,
Yeah.
and having that perspective. So, and with kids, it makes it all different too. So, but
Yes, it does.
anyway.
It certainly does. Well, thank you so much. I really had fun
Thank you
talking
for
to you,
having me,
and
Sam.
absolutely wish you the best, and
You
hopefully see you
too.
soon.
Awesome. Be
All
well,
right.
stay
Good
healthy.
luck.
All
You
right.
too.
Cheers.
Bye bye.